a good hot lash. Get all your tools out. Some iced tea if it's summertime. You gotta tell the dog, we're not playing stick right now, buddy. But one more throw. Okay, so get your tools out, and the objective is to keep your pipe lit. See, I chewed off the end from gripping it in my teeth, so what we're gonna do is put it in the grinder. There you go. Now, see, now I could grip it in my teeth. Got to be able to hold your pipe while you're lashing your valves. That's step one. Step two, you can't have all that hairy stuff sticking out, so what you do is you get yourself, everybody's got, you know, the pan with all the nuts and bolts. You got to stuff the tobacco down inside your pipe. Okay, sorry I'm not getting this properly, but I can hold it in my hands. But lashing your valves is all about doing multiple things at the same time. So this is good prep. It's like stretching. Okay. So now you got your pipe so you can grip it in your teeth. You gotta take off your valve cover here. So let's go through that. I warmed up the engine. I skipped that part, but yeah, you have to warm it up. I'll show you for the posterity here. Need some fuel. Got to make sure it's in neutral. And okay, first operation after lighting your pipe. Don't touch those. I took the valve cover off and opened her up. But since we warmed up the engine, those are hot, and you'll get one of those header kisses right on your shin like that. And now into the technical stuff. You should actually start on the other side on cylinder one, but you could start anywhere as long as you know what valve needs to be opening and what's closing. Is to throw the stick for the dog. All right, so what are we doing here? Valve lash. Why are we doing this for Racecar Maintenance? Well, what we're doing here, the formula is exhaust opening and intake closing. When the exhaust is opening, we adjust the intake. You can tell which one's the exhaust because it's in line with the exhaust pipes. Okay, I happen to have mine marked with a red paint marker, so I know which one I'm doing, because on a Chevy they swap in the middle and the two exhausts are on the inside. See that? But what we're doing is we're lashing to get mechanical clearance from the valve tip to the rocker, and in this case it's a roller. But if you are too tight, it'll hang open a valve, and if you're too loose, it's a noisy valve train and inefficient. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get that one right there as exhaust. I'm going to start with that one there, and I'm going to bump over the engine until I see the exhaust starting to open. See that? It just started to open. So exhaust opening, I can adjust the intake. So we'll start there. So normally you have this kind of wrench, and the beauty of this is it goes on the rocker bolt, and you can put your Allen screw for the lock right down through it, but this one doesn't fit. This is for my Devon. I'm gonna have to get one. So I'm going to use the old wrench and Allen method. and it's just as well. Now, I've pre-warmed up my engine. Oops, this is the wrong one. Okay, this one here. I'll, after I get everything connected, I'll be right back to this. Again, my first step was to pack my pipe, and don't let any ash get in your motor. Second step, throw the stick for the dog. Now I've got everything connected here. I bumped the engine over, and you saw I waited till the exhaust was opening. When the exhaust is opening, that's when you check your lash, and this is a little tight, but I like it that way. By the way, if you set your lashes, you could set them tight or loose, but if you set them tight, you get more torque. If you set them loose, you get more horsepower. So on a big track like Road America, you might want to set them slightly more on the loose side, but I can barely get my feeler gauge between the rocker, and if I make it any tighter than that, I won't be able to get it in there. So this lash I have not adjusted, but it is set properly. If I couldn't get it in there, or if it went in easily, I'd need to make an adjustment. So from before Road America, I set this, it was good. So I'm going to do this. The way I do it is I do it on all of my, I don't want to confuse and go back and forth with feeler gauge. A good mechanic can do that, but I'm going to do all my intakes, all these ones with the yellow spot of paint on them. I don't feel comfortable switching back and forth, especially with the cylinders reversing in the middle and so forth. So I'm going to bump over the engine, do all of my intakes, and you'll see a talented mechanic put it on number cylinder 1, the exhaust opening, and he'll do 4 different cylinders at a time. I like to avoid confusion, do all my intakes on one side, bumping over the engine between each. So now I'm going to move to the next cylinder, and I'm going to wait for my exhaust to open. So I'll go around an entire cycle, bumping it over, and I'll check my intake. Same thing for the next cylinder. So that's setting your hot lash with a warmed up engine, and don't touch those, especially if you do it in the naked legs like I am. And all the while, make sure the dog has a stick, and keep your pipe lit. Bye. Come here, give me that. He doesn't like to give it back. Yeah, that's a bad dog. Come on, give me it. All right, I'm gonna go to the next cylinder. Okay, so I bumped over for the next cylinder, and notice this one, I got my exhaust valve opening right here. Since it's opening, I should be able to check my intake, and I can't get it in there. Now, little known fact, at least I didn't know when I started maintaining engines, is that these actually get tighter because of valve seat wear. They don't get looser like most people would think, or at least that's not what I'm accustomed to. I'm used to finding these get tighter, and in this case, I cannot get my 20 thousandths feeler gauge. This is 0.020. I don't know if you can see that there, but I can't get my feeler gauge in there. So this is too tight. I'm going to have to back this one out. And I find that happens more often than they're loose. Again, that's supposedly from valve seat wear. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to make an adjustment on this one. Have to kind of put the camera down to do that, but it's simply loosening the poly lock, adjusting the nut till I get my clearance, and then tightening the poly lock again while everything's still warm. So I'm going to go ahead and make that adjustment. Dog's still happy, and be back in a minute. Next question you might have is, where did I get the 0.020 number? That comes from your cam card, and whoever did your cam will have given you that information. I'm sure every buddy's race car has a binder, collection of all the information. Logbooks, this is what I call, it's not a logbook like when you go to an event. I have a log of everything that's done on the car and when it's prepped, oil changes, all that stuff. So, and one of the last things is hot lash. That's what I'm working on right now. The event last month at Road America, there was a split in the water tank, and JR didn't like the down tube stays weld, so he redid those and sent them back. I installed them, and now did an oil change, and now I'm hot lashing. So where do you get the numbers for the hot lash? This is the history section of the car, all its life, parts, and let me go, every part in this car, in every one of my cars I have a list of all the part numbers and everything, so I could just easily refer to it and order. But wheels, and it got engine info right there. Okay, so yeah, you want to maintain and take care of these engines. The last owner ain't it well, but there should be a list from your engine builder, and in this case, this is the list of the specs. It's a 302. All the specs on the stroke, compression, everything. Going down the list, we have hot lash. That's where the number comes from that you want to lash your valves to. So you have cold. Obviously, there will be some difference between the cold and hot lash settings. So you want to do it while it's hot, and that's for engine prep for an event. And so again, I open my poly lock. I want to set my resistance, and that's how difficult it is to pull this in or out and back it up until I can just barely get this in with everything in the valve train warm. I'm trying to do this one-handed, so it's slightly tighter than that, and then you set your poly lock, and you give a little bit on your wrench at the same time you set your poly lock, and you make it nice and tight, but you make it so you can remove the spacer, your lash guide. So that's setting your valve lash on the intakes. And again, when the exhaust is opening is when you set those. Got to be careful on some cams, because when you go over center and you start coming back on the exhaust, there should be a full cycle between the intake and the exhaust. But that's why we do the next procedure, which is the exhaust valve adjustments. We do that when the close. Okay, now the next procedure is we have now did exhaust opening. Now we want to do intake closing. So when the intake is closing, so open would be down, and when it starts to close, you want to stop, and that's when you want to adjust the exhaust. So intake closing, I have to say it out loud to remind myself. I'm going to bump over the engine. See how the intake is opening? Okay, on this one. See now the intake is closing. It's in the process of closing, so we know the exhaust valve is in the proper position to check it. And for the exhaust, we've got a 0.022 of an inch. That's not millimeters, by the way, that's the of an inch. So now I'm going to check the lash and see how my lashing tool goes in and out very easily. I'm going to want to tighten that up. I mean, it's pretty stinking close, but you don't want your exhaust valves in the wrong position. Actually, in that case, it's either valve in the wrong position, because those pistons are coming up as your valves are closing, and that's giving you compression, and that's when you fire. So it's critical, especially on higher compression engines, which this is not. This, I think, it's about 10.5. But on a higher compression engine, you're definitely going to want to make sure your intake and exhaust valves are in the proper lash for best performance. And I do this each event, so a weekend, maybe 5-6 outs is an event, and after that weekend, hot lash again for the next weekend. So it's a critical thing I do before an event, after your oil changes and maintenance and everything. So now after you're done adjusting all your valves, very few of mine needed adjustment, but it is absolutely critical to check as a out of spec clearance. One of them was extremely tight and one of them was pretty loose. You want to torque those to about 20 foot-pounds of torque. Check that out with a torque wrench on the poly locks. And anyway, put all the hardware back and send it down. And don't over tighten your valve covers. Oil on a racetrack is a bad thing. Something to remember. Oil on a racetrack is a bad thing. Right, Max? He agrees. Very last step. This is your roll bar stay. That has to be up to do your valve lashing, but I would highly advise to put it back before you're upside down. So, a couple of wrenches, I'm gonna take care of that. But when you're upside down, you don't have your down tube stays. Haven't experienced it, but I'm pretty sure that's a bad thing. So, valves all adjusted. Now let's start her up. Make sure it doesn't sound like anything's wrong. Nothing will be, but always check for neutral. Oh, master switch. If you'd do it wrong, as I did on the Devon before, didn't get a poly lock tight. This is the kind of stuff that happens to that. Rounded a lobe on a cam. Cost me a winter. Yeah. That's a push rod. That's supposed to be flat. I don't know if you can tell, but it's very deceiving. But that's not flat. That's if you do it wrong. Shop dog is critical. Max, you want to play stick? Come on, ready? Ready? Come on, ready? Get the stick. That's critical. Davey's working on his truck down there. Got the shop dog. That's Zen and the art of race car maintenance. Get 2 race cars, they said. It'll be fun. So seems like you're always working on building, rebuilding. Just put the 283 back in. This puppy had the sold the other race motor that was in the car, and freshened the 283, put it back in. It's a 302, and of course you always want spare motor. Nothing special here. Actually it's kind of street, and Oh yeah, you gotta play movies out here. Next thing I'm gonna do, check the brakes. I'll have to do a separate video for that. But I had this out, Road America, and want to make sure you have brake pads. I'm gonna take a look at the fluid also. I was going to be manufacturing some kickers. That's winglets that are gonna end up about here. Figure I'm gonna put these L brackets on the inside and fabricate. I need to do some trimming, but everybody else had these nice kickers, that, as they called them, and they provided additional downforce on the front. I just got these flat tabletops, so I don't really get any velocity pressure. I get lift pressure or reverse lift pressure down for downforce. Be nice to have a kicker on the back too, but not before the next out. Supposed to be Watkins, that was canceled. I'm seriously thinking about bringing this to Rock instead of the Devon. The Devon's prepped and loaded, so it's ready to go for a couple weeks from now, but I think I'm going to take it out of that hot trailer. I tried to buy in some Hoosiers, but the wide ones don't fit. The dog is tired out. He had enough playing stick while I was lashing the valves, and I had a pipe, so goodbye.